What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today I thought I might do something a little different than the usual guide videos that you guys will probably be used to seeing on the channel. So as a lot of you guys know, especially any of my fellow Aussies that are watching, the server issues as of late have made the game pretty much unplayable at this point, which has kind of had me thinking a lot about the current issues with the game, and pretty much since the launch, since it has had a lot of issues since day one. Despite the fact that I do still really enjoy the game, and I have always been one of the very few that always sticks up for the game, at the end of the day it has been a bit of a failure, at least in most people's eyes, and that kind of got me thinking about what they'd need to change in order to prevent the same thing from happening to Battlefront 3. Now, before I get a bunch of comments saying Battlefront 3 isn't happening or no one wants Battlefront 3 to be made, this is just purely speculation on my part. Battlefront 3 hasn't been announced or even really rumoured for that matter. And I'm actually in the same boat as a lot of people in that I don't necessarily want Battlefront 3 to happen, or at least not for a while anyway. I'd much rather see the devs completely fix Battlefront 2 and keep releasing content over the next 2 to 3 years, but obviously that probably isn't going to happen, so if that's the case then I'll be all for them trying again for the third time with Battlefront 3, only if they were to make some real improvements, which is what I'm going to be covering in this video. So sit back and relax because this is most likely going to be a pretty long one. With all that out of the way, here are 10 things that I think the developers would need to do to make Battlefront 3 the Battlefront that we've all been waiting for all these years. So first off the bat is a pretty obvious one, but I really couldn't leave this out since this is pretty much the main reason the game suffered so much at launch, which was the whole pay to win drama. Now I highly doubt they could make the same mistake twice and add pay to win back to the game, but by this point I mean more just the drama itself rather than the actual pay to win aspect. For Battlefront 3 to be a successful game, the launch is definitely the most important part, especially after what has happened with the Battlefront 2 launch. Even today, 9 months after the release of Battlefront 2, the amount of people I see on Twitter or Reddit who are thinking about buying the game, asking if the game is still pay to win, is absolutely crazy, especially when you take into consideration the fact that it was actually removed before the game even launched, yet it still affects the game to this day. For Battlefront 3 to be successful, the game needs a solid launch, and for it to have a solid launch there needs to be no drama at all surrounding the game leading up to the launch date. They need to have a proper hype train going for the game, announcing from day one that there will be no pay to win, and just in general nothing that is going to cause drama on social media, such as some of the stuff that went down with the Battlefield 5 announcement. A solid game with a solid launch is generally a recipe for a good game with a good lifespan, so as long as they can nail that, then hopefully they'll be off on the right foot from day one. The second thing I think they need to improve a whole lot compared to what it has been in Battlefront 2 is more regular updates and patches, which, as I'm assuming about 90% of the people watching this video would know, is pretty much non-existent so far in Battlefront 2. There was the whole progression system argument in the early days of the game as to why there wasn't regular updates, and I actually stood by the devs at that point as I thought they did do a really good job with the progression system, and they pretty much did exactly what we all asked them to. The thing is that it's now been 4 or 5 months since the progression update, and we still haven't really received constant updates like they promised we'd be receiving. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not expecting 2 new heroes and 2 new maps every month or anything like that. I do understand that this stuff does take time, and I'd rather it be done properly instead of being rushed and being buggy or just plain bad when they do release it. But with that being said, surely it can't be too hard for them to assign a small team to giving fortnightly or monthly patches that fix anything wrong with the game or tweak some of the balancing or stuff like that. Games like Fortnite and Rainbow Six Siege manage to put out updates more than once a week, so surely the guys at DICE can manage it at least every fortnight. Not only that, but the recent hotfix issue that turned into a bit more of a cold fix is exactly what I mean. They had to take Palpatine out of the game, and I feel like most game developers would have had him ready and back in the game within a week at the very latest, but we've had to wait over a month just to get him back, so that's the sort of thing I think they need to fix when it comes to regular updates. Again, this isn't necessarily a dig at the DICE devs, they definitely seem to have an extremely small team at the moment, so I'm not going to go out here and bash on them for being slack or anything like that. I have no idea what's going on behind closed doors that could be causing more issues or whatever. But even still, a AAA Star Wars game should not be having these kinds of issues, especially 9 months into the game, if it wants to be even the slightest bit successful. The third thing I think they'd really need to look into adding is some kind of server browser system similar to what Battlefield has for their servers. To some people this might not seem like a necessity, but I know all us guys down in the land of Oz and a lot of other countries like the UK and places like that could really benefit from having a server browser, and also a way that you can see the ping for each server before you do connect to it. I know a lot of my personal beef with Battlefront 2 comes directly from the matchmaking system. Generally it's actually been pretty good for me, at least before the ping site glitch, but I couldn't tell you the amount of times I join a game only to realise that it's laggy, at which point I have to back out and then search for a new game and just hope that I don't get put back into the same lobby again. With a server browser like the Battlefield one, you can save servers to your favourites so that you can find them a lot easier later on. You can narrow down your search specifically what you want, and you can even rent your own servers for you or your mates so that you can change certain rules for the lobby to how you like them. Or for example, I could make a server that only subscribers could join, stuff like that, which I think would be really cool to see in Battlefront 3 as well. The thing with adding a server browser is I really can't see it being all that hard to add to the game. Again, I don't have the first idea when it comes to coding games, but it definitely seems like adding a server browser wouldn't be something impossible for them to do, and even though it's not really a necessity, it is just a really nice quality of life change that I think would be really beneficial to the lifespan of the game, as it would allow people to find games a whole lot easier in the later stages of the game's release. Now the fourth thing I'm going to mention is kind of similar to the last one in that it's a bit more of a quality of life change over anything else, but this one is the addition of a stats section. Honestly, I don't think I've ever played a AAA shooter before that hasn't had a section where you can look at your own KD or your win-loss ratio. They were doing it all the way back in Call of Duty 2, and hell, even Battlefront 2015 had a stat page, so I really can't understand why Battlefront 2 never got one. It honestly kind of baffles me a little bit. Not only should it be pretty easy for them to add, but it also adds a whole other dimension to the game in terms of the competitiveness and banter among you and your mates. I know I have a few mates that I'd love to compare stats with and be able to have arguments over who's the better player and stuff like that. It makes the game a whole lot more enjoyable in so many ways, and again it just adds the competition side of things that Battlefront 2 definitely lacks at the moment. They could even add some kind of leaderboard as well, where you can see where you rank in the world for your win-loss ratio, or the highest kill streak with Darth Vader or Luke Skywalker, or even your points per minute and stuff like that. It just makes the game a lot more addicting when you've got stuff like that to grind towards, and I know for a fact it'll help a lot towards the end of the game, because everyone would be playing to try and move up the leaderboards rather than having pretty much nothing to play for like it is at the moment. Now the fifth thing that I think they could improve on, which any of you offline players would definitely love, is Galactic conquest like we've all been wanting since they announced Battlefront 2015. I feel like this would be such a good gesture for them to make for us diehard fans of the series. They left it out of the last two games, and for them to add it back, I think it would really show that they do care and that they have been listening to what we want as well. Not only that, but it might help them regain a bit of the player base that they lost over the years, again by showing that they realise the mistakes that they made and that they do really want to try and make it up to us. The other good thing about Galactic Conquest is that it wouldn't really need all that much maintenance since it is an offline game mode. They wouldn't really need to worry as much about bugs or imbalances since it wouldn't really affect Galactic Conquest as much as it would affect your normal multiplayer modes. Another massive benefit for having it is that when the game is dead and buried 5 years later, there's always that offline mode that we all hold so dear to our hearts that we could always jump on and play, just like a lot of us still do 13 years after the original Battlefront 2 came out. It just adds so much more longevity to the game, and even for times when the servers go down or something like that, it'd be so much fun to be able to jump on and play some good old Galactic Conquest while we wait, so it's definitely something that I, and I'm sure a lot of you guys, would love to see as well. Moving on to the sixth thing that I think they need to improve on, which is another thing that kind of relates to Battlefield, which is a proper squad system. Now, I know they are already going to be adding that to Battlefront 2 in the coming months, and if you're watching this from the future, then who knows, it might already be in the game for you, but it's something that was really lacking from the launch of Battlefront 2. Having no squad system kind of made it pointless to play Galactic Assault with your friends, as most of the time it honestly just felt like you weren't even in the same lobby unless you were lucky enough to be able to spawn at the same time, and even then that might only happen once a game, so it's something that they definitely need to have from day one of Battlefront 3. I know when I was trying to persuade a lot of my friends to get the game, this was a big reason behind why they never got the game. So it could even end up making a few more sales for EA as well, since people might be much more likely to persuade their friends to buy the game. The seventh thing on my list is a bit more customization for regular troopers and heroes and villains as well. This could be anything from more weapons, weapon mods, abilities, star cards, skins, pretty much just anything that allows a bit more customization within the game. At the moment, we all know that about 50% of the player base just runs your average officer class with the blurg and the officer's present star card. Hell, I'm guilty of it as well, but there is a reason that so many people do it. 1, it's easily the best combination in the game, and 2, what other options are there for the officer class? Why would I pick the S5 over the blurg? Why would I pick the heavy class over the officer class? The reason no one does this is just because there's so few weapons and classes to choose from that we really have no other option if you do want to have a chance of unlocking those heroes that we are all chasing. I know for a fact that if they added 3 or 4 more blasters to the officer class, I'd never touch the blurg again. Even if it was still the best weapon, the variety would be much more appealing to me, and I genuinely think I could go without ever touching any of the current weapons again, even if they still were better than the new ones. Not only that, but if they did add more blasters to some of the lesser used classes, it would definitely make them much more enjoyable to play as well, which just helps again with the longevity of the game. Now, moving on to the 8th thing that needs improvement, which is the amount of heroes in the game, and more specifically the amount of heroes from each era. Currently, Darth Maul is the only true prequel era villain. I know Palpatine and Bossk were in the Clone Wars as well, but Maul is the only villain that we see in the prequel movies and the prequel movies only. Now, I know he does appear in the Clone Wars and Rebels as well, but I think it's safe to say that 90% of people see Maul as a prequel villain rather than anything else. I know they are also adding Dooku and Grievous, so that kind of contradicts what I'm trying to say in a way, but I guess what I mean is I'd love to see more variety of heroes and villains from each specific era. For example, on the light side, the only prequel heroes we have are Chewie and Yoda, who showed up in the original trilogy as well, so you can't really say that they're from the prequels. Characters like Mace Windu or Jango Fett, for example, these are characters that are 100% from the prequels and the prequels only, which I think would just be nice and refreshing to see, rather than 70% of the characters in the game coming from the original trilogy, even if they were in the prequels or the sequels as well. We already had Battlefront 2015 that was purely dedicated to the OT, so I'd love to keep those main bunch of characters from the OT like Luke, Han and Leia, Vader and Boba Fett, and guys like that you just can't leave out. But then also add a few more era-specific characters as well, just to give it a bit more variety within the game. I'm not too sure if it would work or not, but I'd love to see there be enough characters that you could actually lock characters to specific maps. For example, Mace Windu can be used on Geonosis, but he can't be used on the Death Star and stuff like that. I have nothing against the current cross-era system at all. In fact, I actually love being able to play as Rey on Naboo or Darth Maul on Crate. But I absolutely wouldn't be complaining if there was enough characters in the game that you could have 8 heroes and 8 villains that were specific to each era. It would definitely help with the immersion of the game and would bring a bit more excitement each time you get a new map, as you'd have a different set of characters to play as every single game. Now, the 9th thing on my list that I'd like to see improved is kind of similar to the last point in a way, but this is just a bit more variety within the Enforcer classes. By this I mean both more types of classes rather than just the Enforcer and Aerial, as well as a bit more variety within each class as well. I'm sure you all know exactly what I mean when I say the Wookiee Warriors are getting pretty boring at this point, considering there's literally no light side alternative for the Enforcer class, so that's something that I think they really need to fix as well if they are going to be making Battlefront 3. Like I said with the last point, this would not only help with a bit of variety in the game, but it would also help a lot with the immersion of the game as well. It's honestly pretty strange seeing a bunch of Wookiees running around on Tatooine or on the Death Star, and there are so many options for them to choose from as well, so I don't think it'd be too hard for them to come up with a bunch of different characters. A few examples could be characters like Rex and Cody being enforcers for the clones. Rather than having to add them as heroes, they could just become enforcers instead, and you could even just make a generic clone enforcer, and then you can choose a skin for that enforcer. So for example, there might already be someone running around as Rex and Cody, so you could choose Commander Wolf or Fives or someone like that just to add a bit more variety to the game. For the dark side, there are way more options as well, from Magna Guards, Royal Guards, Praetorian Guards, Geonosians. There really are endless possibilities, and it'll just give the game so much more variety and longevity as well. Now finally, coming in at number 10, this is another one for all you offline players, and this one is a longer / better campaign mode. They took a step in the right direction by adding a campaign to Battlefront 2, and I personally thought it was okay. However, it did leave a lot to be desired, not only for the campaign itself, but also for the length at which the campaign was. I'm fairly sure I finished it in around 5 hours or so, and like I said, I didn't really have a problem with it at all, but I definitely would have enjoyed it a lot more if it was a bit longer, and maybe even a bit less linear as well. I know the campaign has to be signed off by Disney, so that's probably why it needed to be pretty linear, as it does have to match canon and it can't really leave plot holes and stuff like that. But I definitely think if it was a bit more open world and a bit longer, it definitely would have been a bit more enjoyable in the long run. So those are the 10 things that I'd love the developers to work on to make Battlefront 3 the Battlefront that we have all been waiting for. Again, I just want to reiterate that this is all speculation. There's been no news at all on Battlefront 3, and honestly, after the failure of Battlefront 2, it wouldn't surprise me if it was never made at all. With that being said, if they are to make this game, then I really hope they would at least add a few of the things that I mentioned into the game, and if they did, then hopefully it'd be a lot more successful than the last two games. It might just be the naive young me that's still holding on hope that they can turn this franchise around. I know how most of you guys feel about Battlefront and just EA and DICE in general, but for some reason I still think they can somewhat turn it around and give us the game that we've all been wanting, even if it takes them a lot longer than it should have. The Battlefront franchise is never going to reach its full potential after all the drama that has occurred over the last 3 years, but if they can just implement a few of these ideas, then hopefully they can make a game that we can all finally be collectively happy about, rather than having such a divided community like we have at the moment. If you guys have any of your own ideas, then definitely let me know down in the comments. I'm keen for a bit of a discussion on this whole Battlefront topic, so let me know what you guys think down in the comments section. Also, if you guys do want to see more stuff like this on the channel, then definitely don't forget to smash that like button and help support the channel. If this video gets 100 likes, then I'll do a similar video for the Jedi Fallen Order game coming late next year. If you are new to the channel, then feel free to subscribe and make sure to turn on your notifications so you don't miss out on any more Battlefront 2 content. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one.